Hi everyone, this is Phil Travis, and this announcement is for week 3 here with American History Part 1. This week we are going to be examining some of the important pre-Revolutionary War developments in the lead up to the founding of the United States. Particularly we're going to be examining the 7 Years' War and also some other domestic developments in the colonies prior to the American Revolution during the 1700s. Our reading for this week is chapter 4 and 5 from our textbook. And also I have a primary source document. It's not long. I have a primary source document relating to the trial of Peter Zenger that I also want you to take a look at. Now, those of you who have been watching the announcements know about the extra credit activity. If you didn't watch the announcements last week, I will reiterate this. We have an extra credit activity in this class where the idea is that you watch these announcements before Wednesday on the week assigned, and then you send me an email no later than Wednesday by midnight reiterating to me the interesting historical factoid that I shared with you in the announcement. And for doing that, each time you do that, you get 1 bonus point added to a test score at the end of the term, which, by the way, can amount to 3 to 4 percentage points on your total final grade. So it can, and it often is in these classes, the difference between a C and a B and an A, or even a D and a C. Hopefully everybody's not in the DC range. Hopefully everybody's at least in the B range. So it's very easy. Just watch these announcements before Wednesday or on Wednesday and email me the historical factoid that I mentioned in the announcement and get your free point. This week we do not have a test. We have no paper due or anything like this. Just our graded discussion forum. So remember to be reading our textbook, Give Me Liberty, chapters 4 and 5. Look at the primary source documents. Watch the recorded presentation that I have provided for you and participate in the discussion forum. Remember, in the discussion forum, I want 2 days of activity beginning by Thursday. I want to see 1 post, 2 replies, and substantial activity as well in the discussion forum. All right, so now to the factoid. So this week we are going to be talking primarily about the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War, which lasted from 1756 until 1763, is one of the most significant events leading up to the Revolutionary Age, both in the American colonies and also in Europe. The 7 Years' War, in many cases, is a precursor to not only the American Revolution, but also the French Revolution. The 7 Years' War results in a huge British victory in North America. And the 7 Years' War was fought really almost throughout the globe, particularly in Europe and North America, but there were battles on the high seas. It was, in a way, a First World War during the 1700s. The 7 Years' War in North America, sometimes referred to as the French and Indian War, resulted in a major British victory over the French. The French, which at the time were the #1 colonial competitor to the British at that point in North America, were defeated and effectively lost all of their North American colonies. Canadian colonies, for example, went to the British. The British effectively received everything east of the Mississippi from the French. So it was a huge victory for the British. However, the ramifications of it, why this was such an important catalyst to the American Revolution, is even though it was a tremendous victory for the British, it cost the British a lot of money. The British had a tremendous amount of debt as a result of this. And the British, too, saw the war as a consequence of the continual Western expansion of colonists in North America into territories held by Native Americans into territories held by the French. And every time a battle or a war would ensue, the British would have to again rally its troops and send its navy over, which cost a tremendous amount of money. So in a lot of ways, the British felt that the American colonists were somewhat to blame for the cost of the conflict in the North American colonies. And as a result of this, the British government took significant measures to limit the westward expansion of colonists, which was hugely significant because from the colonist viewpoint, they had already claimed lands in areas of the Ohio River Valley that were considered west at the time, that the British government was barring them from accessing. Colonists, too, would become strapped by new measures enforced by the Crown of Britain to make the colonies profitable. More than ever before, following the 7 Years' War, in the 1760s, the British government sought to take measures to make their colonies in North America profitable, and hence facilitate a repaying of debt owed from the war. So they sought to make the colonies profitable. They sought to limit western migration of colonists, thereby eliminating the chance of conflict with Native Americans, and hence money. And as a result of that, colonists in the North American colonies began to really feel the pressure. Colonists in the North American territories began to struggle to make a profit due to various forms of taxes. They began to struggle to access good farming lands because of regulations, the Proclamation Line of 1763, that prevented their migrations into Western territories, that many of them had already staked a claim to and had fought the French and Indian War, it might be added, for those very lands. In addition, the British government began the process in the 1760s, following the 7 Years' War, of stationing British soldiers in the colonies. And of course, many colonists saw this as a threat. They saw this as the British government effectively giving them the opportunity to use some kind of martial law, if necessary, on them. Of course, the British argued that this was just so they didn't have to pay for the costs of bringing them over next time another war broke out in the colonies. But the colonists, very much as a result of the 7 Years' War, saw themselves under-challenged by policies of the British government, both in terms of taxation, limitations to the access of Western migration and Western lands, as well as the quartering of British troops in their colonies. And this would lead to a series of tensions and clashes in the late 1760s into the 1770s, giving rise, of course, to the American Revolution. Now, here's the factoid. Oh, by the way, just a little side. The reason it also was sort of the beginning of the process leading to the French Revolution is because the 7 Years' War cost the French a tremendous amount of money, too. And in many respects, the 7 Years' War for the French was the beginning of a series of events that led to a crisis that ultimately gave rise to the French Revolution in 1789. But that's another story for another day. Here's the factoid. The factoid is this. The 7 Years' War in North America began to a large degree because of a claim on land in the Ohio River Valley area, and particularly lands that are today located in western Pennsylvania, not far from Pittsburgh. Those lands were areas that the French and their Native American ally, but particularly the French, had established forts in and had claimed themselves. The individuals, the English individuals, the American colonists, the British American colonists that had claimed the land primarily were some powerful Virginia families, and among them was a young George Washington. At the beginning of the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War in North America, George Washington led a small group of of militiamen, of soldiers, to the area around Fort Duquesne, which is in this area of western Pennsylvania today, to assert their right to their claim to this land that the French were also claiming. And it was a pretty long and arduous operation. Washington's troops had to travel through the rugged Appalachian Mountains. They had to deal with difficult winter months there. It was highly difficult. And then also, Washington's troops were repulsed by the French, and effectively the French forced them out and forced them back to Virginia without securing the French authorization of their right to that land. And this, of course, made the tensions at the end of the war that much greater, as the British basically said to those colonists, the land that is in that area of western Pennsylvania and Ohio, you don't have access to. We don't want you moving west for that farmland. And that was a very tense subject, because many colonists, particularly Virginia colonists, had fought initially in the 7 Years' War for that very land. And among them was, of course, a young George Washington, who would eventually, of course, lead the Continental Army against the British in the American Revolution. So the factoid for this week is this. George Washington led the first expedition to attempt to ask the French to leave the areas of western Pennsylvania, the Ohio River Valley area near Fort Duquesne, and to give in to the claims of Virginia families to that land, thus sparking the first unrest in North America that gave rise eventually to what's called the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War. All right, everybody, send me that factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight. Get your bonus point on a test, and let's have a great week.